we reorient ourselves to be in a place where we can be ready to accept what those relationships bring into our lives, as well as how we give out of them, because it takes on a whole different context when you're tired, when you're spent, and when you don't always feel like sharing.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, the difficulty, one of the biggest difficulties has been dealing with my expectations of how relationships were going to look, how, daily life and goals and all those things were going to work. And I had to go through a process of coming to terms with what actually is. Not the lost thing that I wanted, not even reinventing some other future that's going to look different, but what actually is. And so that, that comes into play, of course, with my son, Jack. But it also comes into play with my relationship with my other children, my wife, and other people, to be forthright and to be able to say, this is what's going on with me. I need to talk to someone, or I need, I'm just going through a rough time right now. And so I'm just going to tell you that, that kind of stuff. And I actually, my son has had a history. He had regressive autism. So he was, progressing normally until he was almost 2, and then sort of lost all his vocabulary. But he has had many, many regressions where he learns all this new language and new skills, and then it just gets lost. So that's happened so many times. And last year he had a particularly harsh regression. And he had a surgery on his brainstem that had to do with motor skills and things. But then for the next 3 months, he just got these severe panic attacks at night, where he was just screaming at the top of his lungs, and he would just be saying the names of his movies, and he would want someone to tell him the names of his movies. And so night after night, we had very, very broken sleep, and it was just so. He was 12 years old, and it's just so disheartening of like, oh, we're going through this again. And I was talking with my senior pastor. I'm the associate, so we work together, and he's, guided me through a lot of this. And we just took a walk one day, and I just said, man, I just need you to know how hard this is right now. And that's all. Like I'm not crashing and burning. I'm not going back into depression, but I just really need you to know this is hard. And I might need a little extra grace. So just being able to communicate that was very helpful. And of course, when somebody knows that, they're like, man, absolutely, and then is able to come alongside and give that kind of support. That's what I think we need to be able to do.
Yeah, and it's almost a process of getting outside yourself to figure out what you do need. I know for me, especially having autistic tendencies myself, I don't know when I need that. And so I'm thankful that I have a spouse who tells me I need that, but I have to be willing to listen to it as well. But knowing yourself, knowing what you need, and not being afraid to ask for it, because you think you're going to ruin the relationships around you. It's scary, but it's something that you need to do. And
well, I think you're exactly right. And I think that's frankly what we do with ourselves and our relationship with God. Because like, if I admit this, then that means I'm weak. Well, we're already weak, so that should be okay. But, people will throw out things like, well, hey, God never gives you anything you can't handle. And things like that, which is like a phrase that's loosely based on a scripture verse, very loosely.
But not in context.
No, it's not. And so things like that. So then we start telling ourselves, oh, well, I must be extra broken. I can't admit this. So we can't admit things to ourselves, and then we certainly can't go to God with those things. And so then we end up keeping God and everyone else at arm's length, because we're simply not able to share those things. But I'm thinking about my relationship with my wife, and it's when we can be really vulnerable with one another and share what's actually going on, that we find ourselves drawing closer to one another. And I think that's true with
true.
God and with others. So with God, sometimes that means you just got to tell him what's on your mind. You just got to tell him how much you're hurting, and not be afraid that you're going to hurt his feelings.
Oh yeah, I love that. And you share a story in your book about that. And that so resonated with me, because I had an episode once where I was in the bathroom screaming at the top of my lungs, thank God. And my kids are like, "Are you cursing?" I'm like, "No, I'm praying." But I mean, and you even say this, he can take it.
Yes.
And we think that we have to be strong, but we are weak. And once we admit that weakness and that he's strong, that's when things start to change.
Yeah, we're kind of a mess.
Yeah, really
but
are.
He takes us that way. And I tell you, I've been doing a study on the Psalms the past few weeks for my church, and just going through every Psalm slowly, and the broad range of emotion that the psalmists bring is just staggering. There's just like such hopelessness and like, Lord, why haven't you come? Or such anger, or the sense of abandonment, or exhilaration. All of these things, they're just coming wholeheartedly and telling him. And I think today, a lot of us would be like, well, I can't do that. I can't tell him that.
That's not church etiquette.
I know, it's so silly. It's like, well, first of all, he already knows that you feel that way. And I think sometimes he's just waiting for us to be honest.
Definitely. So true.